It was a bright Saturday afternoon when the town community center filled with the sounds of laughter, clinking cups and chatter. The smell of baked bread, coffee, and fresh flowers floated through the air. It was one of those small-town gatherings where everyone knew each other, or at least thought they did. Among the cheerful noise sat a woman named Maria Lopez, sitting quietly near the back of the hall. She wore a simple beige sweater and dark blue skirt, her hair neatly tied back in a bun. Her hands rested in her lap, and a gentle smile stayed on her face as she listened to others talk. Maria was not the kind of person who drew attention. She had a softness about her, kind eyes, calm voice, and a way of making people feel at ease. She worked at the local bakery, known for her warm bread and friendly greetings every morning. Most people saw her as polite and humble, but no one really knew much about her life beyond the counter. She never spoke about her past, her family, or her hobbies. She was just Maria from the bakery. The community hall buzzed with excitement that day because it was the annual town reunion. Everyone brought homemade dishes, stories, and laughter. There was music from a small speaker and children running around with balloons. In the corner of the hall next to the refreshment table stood an old upright piano. It had been there for years. Its wooden frame faded, some keys chipped, and the soundboard slightly cracked. No one had played it in ages. Most people didn't even know if it still worked. As the day went on, a small group gathered near the piano, joking and laughing. Someone pressed a few keys, and the sound that came out was rough, uneven, and out of tune. They all laughed. "Sounds like a dying cat," one man joked, and everyone around him chuckled. Then someone's eyes landed on Maria, who was quietly sipping tea and smiling at the scene.
"Hey, Maria,"
a woman called out teasingly. "You look like the kind of person who knows how to play this old thing. Why don't you give it a try?" The group laughed again. It wasn't meant to be mean, but it carried that kind of humor people use when they don't expect someone to actually take the challenge. They just wanted some fun, maybe a few clumsy notes to laugh about. Maria looked up, surprised. Her cheeks turned slightly pink, and she let out a small laugh, trying to hide her discomfort. "Oh no, I haven't played in years," she said softly, but that only made them tease her more. "Come on, just one song," another person said. "Let's see if this piano still works. You probably can't make it sound any worse than it already does." Maria looked at their smiling faces. She could tell they didn't mean harm, but there was a tone behind their words, a mix of curiosity and doubt. She'd felt it before. People saw her as the quiet one, the gentle one, the woman who baked bread but didn't have much else to her name. She glanced at the piano again. Its wooden body was scratched and dusty. A few of the white keys had yellowed with age. But something about it pulled at her heart. Maybe it was the way it sat forgotten in the corner, much like she often felt in life, present but unnoticed. Her fingers itched slightly. She hadn't played in a long time, but the memory of her mother teaching her simple tunes when she was a child came flooding back. Her mother used to say, "A piano may have broken keys, but music still lives in the ones that work." She smiled faintly at that thought. "All right," she said finally, her voice soft but steady. "I'll try." The group cheered playfully, clapping their hands and stepping back to give her space. Some crossed their arms, smirking, waiting to see her struggle with the broken instrument. Others were just amused, expecting nothing special. Maria stood up slowly and walked to the piano. The room's chatter dimmed a little as people noticed what was happening. She brushed the dust from the bench before sitting down. The wooden seat creaked under her weight. Her hands hovered over the keys for a moment. The first touch felt strange, cold, uneven. A few keys stuck slightly when pressed. She pressed a few random notes. The sounds were crooked and off-key. A small ripple of laughter came from behind her, not cruel but careless. Maria didn't react. She simply took a deep breath and closed her eyes for a moment. In that silence, her mind went somewhere else, back to her small home years ago when her mother would hum softly while cooking, and the sound of an old piano would drift from the next room. Music had been her comfort once. When she opened her eyes again, there was a calmness in them, but before she played a single song, something interesting happened inside her heart. She realized she wasn't doing this to prove anything. She wasn't doing it to entertain them either. She was doing it for herself, to touch that forgotten part of her soul that still believed in beauty, even in broken things. She placed her fingers gently on the keys, testing their strength. The laughter faded as people grew curious. They could see her expression had changed. She wasn't nervous anymore. She looked peaceful. But before she could begin, one man joked again, "Hey, just don't break it completely," and a few chuckles followed. Maria smiled faintly. She didn't respond. Instead, she whispered to herself, "Let's see what you still remember." And though no music came yet, the moment carried a quiet weight. Everyone could feel something shift even if they didn't understand what. Maria didn't rush. She let her hands rest on the keys for a long while, almost like she was listening to the piano breathe. The light from the window fell softly across her face and the whole hall seemed to slow down. Some people went back to chatting, assuming it was just another small-town moment. Nothing special. But a few stayed watching her, drawn by something gentle, something unspoken. One child whispered to her mother, "Is she really going to play it?" The woman shrugged. "I think so." Maria's thoughts drifted again. She remembered being a teenager, sitting at the same kind of old piano her mother bought secondhand. It had scratches and dents just like this one. She had spent hours learning simple songs not from books but from feeling. Her mother couldn't read music either, but she always said, "Play with your heart, not your eyes." It had been years since Maria touched any piano. Life had moved her in different directions: work, family, loss, and quiet days spent serving others. The music had stayed locked inside her like a memory hidden in a box she never opened. Until now, her heart beat faster. Not from fear, but from something else, something alive. "Go on, Maria," someone called with a playful tone. "Let's hear that magic." She smiled again, a little wider this time. "Magic," she whispered. "We'll see." She didn't start playing yet. She just sat there taking in the sound of the room, the voices, the laughter, the clinking cups. It was all part of life's melody, she thought. Then she slowly pressed one note. It echoed softly. The sound was imperfect, slightly flat. But to her, it was beautiful. The group laughed again lightly, thinking she was just testing it out. But Maria wasn't paying attention anymore. She pressed another note and then another, each one unlocking something inside her. The sound was far from perfect, yet her eyes softened and a calm smile formed on her lips. Somewhere deep down, Maria already knew what was about to happen next. The room was still full of voices and laughter when Maria sat before the piano. But slowly, a few people began to notice the quiet focus on her face. Her fingers rested lightly on the keys, almost afraid to disturb the air. She pressed another note, then two together. The sound came out uneven, cracked in places, but her eyes softened instead of showing frustration. It was as if the piano's broken voice didn't bother her at all. A few people nearby exchanged glances. One whispered, "Does she even know what she's doing?" Another laughed quietly. "Probably just fooling around," he said. Maria heard the whispers, but she didn't mind. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was simply listening, to the piano, to the way each sound blended with her heartbeat. Her hands moved slowly at first, testing which keys still worked. The air carried a soft echo of the past. She remembered the evenings when she used to sit with her mother, who would hum lullabies in the kitchen while Maria played softly from the next room. Her mother's favorite song was one that Maria learned by ear, playing until the melody became second nature. She hadn't played it in years, but at that moment, her fingers almost seemed to remember it on their own. The first few notes of that old tune began to form under her hands. The melody stumbled a bit, some notes sounding rough, but it had feeling, something deep and real. The people nearby stopped laughing for a moment. They looked at each other, surprised that the sounds were starting to come together. Maria didn't look up. Her focus deepened. The noise of the room faded away until it was just her and the piano. Her fingers grew steadier. The rhythm found her again, like an old friend returning after a long time. Across the room, an older man put down his drink. He tilted his head slightly, listening. "That tune," he murmured. "I think I've heard it before." Someone beside him nodded. "Yeah, it's kinda nice, actually." The tone in the room began to shift, though no one said it aloud. The laughter quieted. Conversation softened. People turned one by one, drawn by the unexpected sound rising from the corner. The piano, though broken, was alive in Maria's hands. A small group gathered closer, their faces curious now instead of mocking. The melody grew clearer, Her left hand moved gently across the lower keys, finding depth, while her right hand danced across the higher ones with surprising grace. The man who had teased her earlier stood with crossed arms, trying to hide his surprise. He had expected a few random notes, maybe some laughter. But this was something else. Maria didn't notice him watching. She was lost in the moment. Her shoulders relaxed and her breathing matched the flow of the music. For a few minutes she forgot she was in a crowded hall. She was back in her childhood home, back in that quiet room where her mother would hum along softly, telling her to play from the heart. Then, without warning, one of the keys stuck completely. The sound cut short. A small gasp escaped from someone watching. Maria's fingers froze for a moment. The group waited, expecting her to stop, maybe laugh it off. But she didn't. She smiled gently and shifted her hands. She adjusted the melody, skipping the broken key, and continued playing without missing a beat. The music flowed around the flaw, weaving it into something new. It was imperfect, yet somehow even more beautiful for it. Someone whispered, "She's really good." Another nodded slowly, their earlier smile fading into quiet respect. The hall was no longer filled with laughter. It was filled with music. Fragile, heartfelt music that carried a kind of truth words couldn't express. The children who had been running around stopped near the doorway, listening with wide eyes. Even the volunteers at the refreshment table turned to watch. Maria's face glowed with soft emotion. The light from the window caught the side of her cheek, highlighting the lines of a life lived with kindness and quiet strength. Each note she played seemed to carry a piece of her story, her hard days, her lonely mornings, her memories of love and loss. For a brief moment, she forgot everyone else existed. She wasn't playing to prove herself. She wasn't playing for applause. She was playing because the piano, even in its broken state, still had a voice just like her. When she finally stopped, there was silence. It lasted longer than anyone expected. The air felt heavy but peaceful, like the moment right after rain. Maria opened her eyes slowly. Her hands rested on the keys, trembling slightly. She looked down, then gave a small, shy smile. She hadn't planned any of it. She had just played. From behind her, someone clapped softly. Just one person at first, then another joined in. Soon the whole room was applauding. Not loudly, not wildly, but with genuine warmth. Maria turned her head, her face surprised. "Oh, I didn't mean to make a show," she said quietly, her voice almost lost in the sound of clapping. One woman near the front smiled. "That was beautiful," she said. Maria shook her head gently. "The piano did most of the work," she said with a small laugh. People chuckled softly, but this time it wasn't mocking. It was tender, respectful. The man who had teased her earlier stepped forward, scratching the back of his head. "I didn't know you could play like that," he said awkwardly. Maria smiled politely. "It's been a long time," she replied. "I used to play when I was younger. My mother taught me." He nodded, feeling slightly embarrassed. "Well, that was really something." Maria stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Thank you," she said simply. She didn't seem proud, just grateful. She reached for her cup of tea, which had gone cold, and took a sip. Around her, people were still murmuring about the performance. "Can you believe that? She played like a professional. That piano's a wreck, but she made it sound like magic." Maria smiled quietly to herself. She hadn't thought of it as magic, just honesty. When she looked at the piano, she didn't see something broken. She saw something that still had value. And maybe deep down, that's how she saw herself too. As the day went on, people continued to talk to her. Some asked where she learned to play. Others wanted to know if she would teach their kids. A few just came over to thank her for the music. Each time, Maria answered softly, her eyes kind and humble. But inside, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. A small spark of joy. Not the loud, showy kind, but the quiet kind that stays with you long after everyone's gone home. Later that evening, as the hall emptied and the last of the decorations were being taken down, Maria walked back to the piano one more time. The light was dim now and the air smelled faintly of coffee and flowers. She ran her fingers across the keys again, softly pressing one note. It wobbled out of tune. She smiled. "Thank you," she whispered to the piano as if it could hear her. "You did well." Then she turned off the small lamp nearby and left the hall, her steps light and unhurried. Behind her, the piano sat quietly in the corner, old, cracked, and still beautiful in its own way. And though the laughter and chatter of the afternoon had long faded, the people who were there would remember that moment. The way a humble woman, asked to play as a joke, filled a room with something they hadn't expected to feel: respect, wonder, and peace. What none of them knew was that this was only the beginning, because sometimes a single act, small and unplanned, opens a door that was waiting quietly all along. And for Maria, that door had just begun to open. The following weekend, the town held another small gathering at the same community hall. It wasn't a big event this time, just a casual get-together for coffee and music. But people still showed up, carrying small dishes, chatting and laughing. The piano still sat in the corner, untouched since Maria had played it. Some said they could still hear her melody in their minds whenever they walked past the hall. Others told friends who hadn't been there what had happened: the quiet woman who made the old piano come alive. Maria hadn't planned to come that day. She almost stayed home, thinking maybe people had already forgotten about it. But something in her heart told her to go. She baked a basket of sweet rolls that morning and arrived quietly, like she always did. When she walked into the hall, a few people waved at her right away. "Maria, you're here," one woman said with a warm smile. "We were just talking about you." Maria blushed lightly. "Oh, I hope it was something nice," she said with a soft laugh. "It was," another person replied. "We were talking about that song you played. It's been in my head all week." Maria smiled, surprised. "I didn't think anyone would remember." "Are you kidding?" the woman said. "We're still talking about it." Maria thanked them and went to place her basket of rolls on the refreshment table. She noticed the piano across the room again. The light from the window fell across its scratched surface. It still looked old and broken, but somehow it seemed to stand a little taller now, as if proud. The group began to gather around for conversation. Someone brought out a small guitar, another person a tambourine. They played a few simple songs together, laughing when someone missed a chord. It was light-hearted and fun. Then someone turned toward Maria again. "Hey Maria, you should play for us again," a man said kindly. "That piano has been waiting for you." Maria shook her head, shyly smiling. "Oh no, I think it's had enough of me." But the people didn't give up. "Come on," another voice said. "You made it sound beautiful last time. Just one song." Maria hesitated, her fingers brushing the edge of the table. A part of her wanted to say no, to stay in her quiet corner away from attention. But another part of her, the one that had been asleep for years, whispered softly, "Play again." She looked toward the piano. It almost felt like it was calling her. She took a slow breath and nodded. "All right," she said quietly. "Just one." The chatter dimmed. People moved their chairs closer, and those standing found a place near the back. Even the children quieted down. There was a gentle excitement in the air, mixed with curiosity. Maria walked to the piano and sat down, her skirt brushing the bench. The wood creaked under her weight. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling the familiar uneven texture. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear but from emotion. She pressed a few keys to test the sound. Some notes buzzed, others were sharp, but she didn't flinch. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting her mind travel. This time she decided to play something different, something that carried both her joy and her pain. It was a song she had written herself many years ago, back when she believed her music could heal hearts, including her own. The first notes were soft, barely louder than a whisper. The sound filled the quiet hall like a warm breeze. The melody rose gently, moving like the rhythm of calm waves. The broken keys didn't matter. She worked around them with grace. Her hands flowed over the piano as if guided by something deep inside her. The crowd leaned in. The same people who once laughed now sat completely still, their eyes fixed on her. The music began to grow stronger, carrying emotion that words could never say. Each note told a story, of love, of loss, of strength found in silence. It was as if the piano itself remembered every person who had ever played it, and through Maria it was finding its voice again. Her fingers moved faster, more confident, her body swaying slightly with the rhythm. The tune filled the room, soft at times, powerful at others. Some people closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Others simply stared, caught between awe and disbelief. The man who had teased her the first time stood near the wall, arms crossed tightly. But his eyes softened now. He wasn't smiling. He looked thoughtful, maybe even guilty. As Maria played, she remembered her mother again. The days when they had so little, yet found comfort in small things, a shared meal, a song, a kind word. Her mother used to say, "Music is the language of the soul. When words fail, play." And that's what she was doing now, speaking without words. The melody shifted into something even deeper. It carried sorrow, but also light. Some notes were gentle like tears falling, others bright like morning sun after rain. It wasn't a song of sadness. It was a song of hope, of finding beauty in brokenness. The people in the hall felt it too. A woman near the front wiped a tear from her cheek. A young boy leaned against his mother's arm, listening quietly. The man with the guitar had set it down and sat frozen, completely caught up in the moment. Even the children who had been fidgeting earlier now sat cross-legged on the floor, their eyes wide. Maria's hands slowed, the song nearing its end. The final notes lingered in the air, trembling softly before fading into silence. No one moved. The room felt sacred, like something holy had passed through it. Maria kept her hands on the keys for a moment longer, then slowly looked up. Her eyes met the faces around her, silent, still, filled with emotion. She smiled faintly, her heart pounding. Then, as if waking from a dream, someone began to clap. It started softly, hesitantly, then grew louder. Within seconds, the whole room was filled with applause. Not the quick kind people give to be polite, but deep, honest applause, the kind that comes from being moved. Maria looked down, her cheeks warm. She hadn't expected this. She gave a small nod, whispering, "Thank you." People stood to their feet, clapping harder. Some were smiling through tears. The man who had teased her before stepped forward again. His expression completely changed. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "That was unbelievable." Maria smiled kindly. "It's just an old song," she said softly. He shook his head. "No, it was more than that." Others gathered around her, offering words of praise and gratitude. "You made that piano come alive," someone said. "I didn't know something broken could sound like that." Maria looked at the piano, her eyes gentle. "Sometimes," she said, "broken things just need someone to listen differently." The crowd fell quiet at her words. They carried truth that touched everyone there. For the rest of the evening, the hall was filled with warmth. People shared stories, laughed, and kept glancing at the piano, almost expecting it to play on its own. The atmosphere was different now, softer, kinder. As the event ended, several people stayed behind to talk with Maria. They asked if she would play again at future gatherings, maybe even teach some of the children. She hesitated at first, but then nodded. "If it helps bring people together," she said, "I'd love to." When everyone had gone, Maria sat alone for a while, running her fingers over the keys once more. The sound was faint, but beautiful in its imperfection. She thought about how something meant as a joke had led to this moment, a room full of hearts opened by a simple melody. It made her realize something powerful. Sometimes life gives you a broken piano, and sometimes you are the one meant to show that it can still make music. Maria closed the piano lid gently and smiled to herself. The next time she played, she knew it wouldn't just be for the people in the room. It would be for her mother, for the little girl she once was, and for anyone who had ever felt unseen. That day, the hall didn't just echo with sound. It echoed with a message everyone carried home with them. Beauty can rise from the most unexpected places. And from that moment on, the quiet woman from the bakery was no longer just someone who baked bread. She was the woman who played the broken piano and made the whole town listen. The next few weeks brought small but noticeable changes in the little town. The story of Maria playing the broken piano spread far beyond the people who had been there to witness it. Someone told their cousin, another told their coworker, and soon, nearly everyone had heard about the quiet woman who made an old, useless piano sound like it came from heaven. Maria didn't think much of it at first. She still woke up early every morning, baked her bread, and greeted every customer with her usual smile. The bakery smelled of sugar and warmth, and she went about her work as she always had. But she began to notice something different. People looked at her differently now, not with the casual kindness they used before, but with genuine admiration. Some came into the bakery just to see her and say hello. "You're the lady who played at the hall, aren't you?" one man said, smiling as he picked up a loaf of bread. "That was something special. My wife cried when she heard about it." Maria would smile shyly. "That's kind of you to say," she'd reply, handing him his change. She didn't know what else to say. She wasn't used to attention. One afternoon, as she was closing the bakery, a group of children ran in. They couldn't have been older than 10.
"Miss Maria,"
one of them said excitedly.
"can you teach us to play the piano like you?"
Maria laughed softly. "Oh, I don't think I'm much of a teacher," she said, "but please." Another child begged. "Our mom said you play from the heart, and we want to learn that too." She looked at their eager faces and felt something warm bloom in her chest. "All right," she said. "Maybe one day we can try." That one day came sooner than she expected. The next Saturday, she went back to the community hall to check on the piano. It was still there in the same corner, a bit cleaner now. Someone had dusted it, and there were fresh flowers in a vase sitting on top. When she sat down to play a few notes, she noticed a young boy watching her from the doorway. Then another joined him. Before long, a small group of children gathered around, sitting cross-legged on the floor, waiting quietly. Maria smiled and said, "You can come closer." They did. She showed them how to touch the keys gently, how to listen for the sound even when it wasn't perfect. "It doesn't matter if the piano is broken," she told them. "You can still make it sing if you listen with your heart." The children tried, pressing keys and laughing when they made odd noises. Maria encouraged them, telling them every sound had its own beauty. Soon the hall was filled with little bursts of laughter and clumsy melodies. For the first time in years, Maria felt a joy she hadn't known she missed. Teaching these children reminded her of the days when she used to sit beside her mother, learning by watching, by feeling, by loving the sound of music. Word spread quickly again. Parents started bringing their kids every weekend to Maria's piano time. It wasn't an official class, but everyone called it that. The hall came alive each Saturday afternoon with music, laughter, and the smell of snacks people brought to share. But it wasn't just the children who came. Adults started showing up too, curious and quietly moved. Some sat in the back just to listen to Maria play for the kids. Others joined in, clapping along or humming softly. It became more than a music session. It became a gathering, a little piece of peace for everyone in town. One day, the same man who had teased Maria the first time she played the piano walked in. He looked nervous, carrying a small wooden box. When Maria saw him, she smiled kindly. "It's good to see you," she said. He cleared his throat and said, "I brought something." He opened the box, and inside were old piano strings and tools. "I used to work at a repair shop years ago," he said. "Thought maybe I could help fix this piano a little. It deserves better after what you did with it." Maria's eyes softened. "That's very kind," she said. Together they spent the afternoon tightening strings, replacing a few that were completely worn out. The sound wasn't perfect yet, but it was better. The man looked at her as she pressed the keys to test them. "You know," he said quietly, "I'm sorry for the way I treated you before. I didn't mean to make fun of you." Maria looked up and smiled gently. "It's all right," she said. "Sometimes people just don't see what something or someone is capable of until they listen closely." He nodded, eyes glistening a little. "You made me listen differently." That night, when Maria went home, she sat by her window and looked out at the town. The lights in the houses glowed softly, and she could hear faint music drifting from somewhere down the street. Someone playing a small keyboard, practicing one of the tunes she'd shown the children. She smiled. The sound was uneven, but it was beautiful. As the days passed, Maria's music began to mean more than just sound. It became a reminder for everyone that even quiet people could hold great stories inside them, that something broken could still bring light, that kindness and patience could change hearts. One afternoon, the town's mayor came to the bakery. He was a tall man with a gentle voice. "Maria," he said, "I've been hearing about what you've been doing with the children. Everyone's talking about how that old piano has brought the community together." Maria blushed. "Oh, I just play sometimes. The piano does most of the work." The mayor chuckled. "I don't think that's true. We want to do something special. We're planning to restore the piano completely. The town will cover the cost." Maria's eyes widened. "Really?" "Yes," he said. "And we'd like to dedicate it in your mother's memory. We heard how much she meant to you and how she taught you to play." Maria's throat tightened. She hadn't spoken much about her mother, but somehow they had found out. She nodded, her voice soft. "That would mean a lot." The following weeks were full of life. The piano was taken to a local craftsman who worked carefully on every detail. When it returned, it looked beautiful, polished, clean, and shining with care. The town held a small ceremony to celebrate. The hall was decorated with ribbons and candles. Everyone came, the children, their parents, shop owners, neighbors. Even people from nearby towns joined after hearing about the event. Maria stood near the piano, her hands clasped together. She felt nervous but also grateful. When she sat down to play, the entire hall fell silent. The keys were smooth under her fingers now, and the sound that came out was rich, full, and warm. She began with a soft melody, one that her mother used to hum. The tune filled the hall like sunlight, touching everyone's hearts. People closed their eyes, some holding hands, others wiping tears. When she finished, the applause was thunderous, but more than that, it was full of love. Afterward, people gathered around her again, thanking her for everything she had done. Maria smiled, humbled. "I didn't do much," she said. "It was all of us together." That night, when she returned home, she sat quietly for a long time. She thought about how something that started as a small joke had turned into something beautiful, a chain of kindness, learning, and connection. She looked at her hands and smiled. They were the same hands that had kneaded dough every morning, the same hands that had hesitated to touch the piano again. Now they had given something back to the world. In her heart, she felt her mother's presence, soft and reassuring. She could almost hear her say, "See? The music never leaves us. It just waits until we're ready to play again." Maria closed her eyes and whispered, "You were right, Mama." Outside, the town lights shimmered softly. Somewhere in the distance, a child practiced a song on a small keyboard, and Maria listened, smiling through quiet tears. The woman who had once been invisible was now the heart of her town, not because she sought attention, but because she gave from her soul. And the piano, once forgotten and broken, had become a symbol of something far greater, proof that beauty can rise from the most unexpected places, as long as someone believes in it. After the ceremony, the town felt different. People still went about their usual days, opening shops, tending gardens, baking bread. But there was a new sense of warmth in the air, like something gentle had settled over everyone. The piano at the community hall had become more than just an instrument. It was now a gathering place. Every week people stopped by, some to play, some just to listen. Sometimes the sound of music would drift through the open doors and fill the streets outside. It was simple, but it brought joy. And at the heart of it all was Maria. She never asked to be the center of attention, yet somehow she had become a quiet symbol of kindness and hope. The children still came to her on weekends, eager to learn. She taught them not by strict rules or books, but by feeling. She told them, "Don't worry if you play the wrong note. Just keep playing. The heart knows what comes next." The children adored her. They would bring her little gifts, drawings, cookies, small flowers picked on the way. One girl even wrote her a note that said, "When I grow up, I want to be kind like you." Maria kept that note tucked inside her piano book. Every time she felt tired or uncertain, she opened it and smiled. One afternoon, while she was teaching, a stranger walked into the hall. He was tall and carried a small bag. His eyes moved across the room until they found her. He waited quietly until she finished helping one of the children. "Excuse me," he said politely when she looked up. "Are you the woman who played here some weeks ago?" Maria nodded, a bit unsure. "Yes, that's me."
Can I help you?
He smiled warmly. "My name is Daniel. I work at the Regional Music Center. Someone sent me a recording of your performance. I wanted to see it for myself." Maria blinked in surprise. "A recording?" "Yes," he said. "Someone must have filmed you during the ceremony. The video reached us and everyone at the center was amazed. You play with such emotion, it's rare." She blushed deeply, shaking her head. "Oh, I'm not a professional. I just play for the town sometimes." "That's what makes it special," he replied. "It's honest. I'd like to invite you to our community concert next month. You could play one song just like you did here." Maria was speechless. The idea of performing outside her little town frightened her. "I don't know," she said softly. "I've never played anywhere else." Daniel smiled kindly. "There's no pressure. Think about it. The world could use more music like yours." He left his card on the piano and wished her a good day. For days afterward, Maria couldn't stop thinking about it. She wanted to say no, to stay in her quiet corner, but deep inside something stirred. Maybe this was what her mother would have wanted, to share the music beyond these walls. She finally decided to accept. The whole town cheered when they heard the news. "We'll come with you," the children shouted. "We'll be your audience." The weeks leading up to the concert were filled with excitement. Maria practiced in the hall every evening after work. The sound of her music floated out through the open windows, and sometimes people walking by would stop to listen. But even with all the support, Maria still felt nervous. She wasn't used to bright lights or large crowds. One night she sat alone in the empty hall, her fingers resting on the keys. "I hope I don't disappoint them," she whispered. A soft breeze moved through the room, carrying the faint scent of the flowers on the piano. She closed her eyes and imagined her mother standing beside her, smiling gently. In her heart, she heard her mother's voice. "Play like you're at home, my dear. That's all you need to do." The night of the concert arrived. The event was held in a large auditorium in the nearby city. Maria had never seen so many people gathered in one place. The stage lights shone bright and the murmur of the audience filled the air. She stood backstage, her hands trembling slightly. One of the organizers came over and said kindly, "You'll do fine. Just be yourself." When her name was announced, the applause was polite but curious. People didn't know what to expect from the humble woman who played a broken piano. Maria walked slowly onto the stage, her heart pounding. She sat at the grand piano. It was gleaming and perfect, a far cry from the old one back in the community hall. For a moment, she felt out of place. Then she took a deep breath and whispered, "This one's for you, Mama." She began to play. At first, the notes were soft, almost fragile, but as her hands moved, the music grew fuller, richer. It was the same melody she had played in the hall, but now it carried the strength of everything she had lived through. The audience grew silent. Every sound in the room seemed to disappear except for her music. Her fingers flowed effortlessly, telling a story of love, pain, and healing. Halfway through the song, her nerves faded completely. She wasn't on a stage anymore. She was back home, sitting at the old piano, sunlight streaming through the window. When she reached the final note, the hall stayed quiet for a moment. Then came the applause, long, loud, and filled with emotion. People stood to their feet, clapping and cheering. Maria looked up, her eyes shining. She placed her hand over her heart and smiled. "Thank you," she whispered into the microphone. After the concert, many people came to meet her. Some thanked her for reminding them of their own mothers or their childhood homes. Others simply said her music made them feel at peace. Daniel approached her with a wide smile. "You were incredible," he said. "Would you consider recording some of your music? We could help you share it with more people." Maria hesitated, her heart full. "I never imagined this," she said softly. "I just wanted to make that old piano sing again." "That's exactly why people need to hear you," Daniel said. "You remind us that real music comes from the soul." Maria promised to think about it. When she returned to her town, the entire community gathered at the hall to celebrate her. They had hung up banners and brought food and flowers. The children rushed to her as soon as she arrived. "You did it," they shouted. "We saw you on TV. You were amazing." Maria laughed and hugged them. "Thank you, my little ones. I couldn't have done it without your support." That evening, she played one more song for everyone, something light and joyful. People sang along, clapped their hands, and filled the hall with laughter. As the night came to an end, Maria sat alone at the piano again, her fingers resting on the keys. She thought about how far she had come, from being the quiet woman who baked bread, to someone whose music reached hearts beyond her small town. She realized that what mattered most wasn't the fame or the stage. It was the connection. It was the way her music made people remember their own stories, their own forgotten dreams. She looked up at the night sky through the window and whispered, "Thank you, Mama. I finally understand what you meant." The piano gleamed softly under the light, and for a moment it seemed to hum back a quiet reply. From that day on, Maria continued to play, teach, and inspire. She didn't chase recognition. She simply shared her gift wherever it was needed, at hospitals, schools, and community events. Each place she went, the same thing happened. People listened and hearts softened. Her story reminded everyone that greatness doesn't always come from grand beginnings. Sometimes it comes from a humble woman, a broken piano, and a song played with love. And though Maria never sought fame, her music continued to travel, recorded, shared, and remembered by those who had been touched by it. She often said, A piano doesn't need to be perfect, and neither do we. What matters is that we keep playing. And she did. Every day with grace, gratitude, and a smile that carried the light of someone who had once been quiet, but now was heard. The seasons began to change again, and with them, life in the small town settled into a new rhythm. The bakery still smelled like comfort every morning. Children still ran through the streets after school, and laughter could still be heard from the community hall on weekends. But something deeper had changed, something that lingered quietly in the hearts of the people. They saw the world differently now. They smiled more. They listened more. They believed that even simple things could hold beauty if seen with kindness. And at the center of that quiet change was Maria. She was still the same humble woman she had always been. She wore her hair the same way, still wiped flour on her apron, still gave an extra cookie to children who came into the bakery. But now there was something new in her eyes, a light that came from knowing she had made a difference. The piano in the hall had become a part of everyone's life. It wasn't just for music anymore. It was where people gathered when they wanted to feel connected. On birthdays, on holidays, even on quiet afternoons, someone would sit at the piano and play a tune Maria had taught them. Sometimes Maria would sit among them, watching with a smile. She didn't always play anymore. She didn't need to. Seeing others find joy in the music was enough. One cold winter evening, the town decided to hold a small concert again, this time not to honor Maria, but to celebrate what her kindness had created, a community of music and togetherness. The children who had once struggled to find the right keys now played confidently. Their hands, though small, moved with purpose and feeling. Maria sat in the front row, her eyes filled with quiet pride. When the final song ended, the mayor stood up and spoke. "This town was once quiet," he said, looking around. "But now it's full of life. We owe that to a woman who reminded us that broken things can still make beautiful sounds." The crowd turned to Maria, clapping and cheering, but she shook her head gently. "No," she said, smiling. "It wasn't me. It was all of us. The music belongs to everyone." Later that night, as the snow began to fall softly outside, Maria stayed behind in the hall. Everyone else had gone home. The lights were dim, and the piano sat quietly in the corner. She walked over to it, brushing a bit of dust off the top, and sat down. Her fingers rested on the keys, and she began to play a slow, soft melody. It was a song she had never played before, something new, something that seemed to come from the moment itself. Each note floated through the empty hall like a whisper, gentle and full of warmth. As she played, her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness but of gratitude. She thought of her mother, of the first time she'd touched a piano, of the people who had once laughed and later learned to listen. She remembered the broken piano that had started it all, the one that wasn't meant to be played, the one that brought her back to music. When she finished, she sat quietly for a while, her hands resting on the keys. Then she smiled softly and whispered, "Thank you." The sound of the wind outside answered like a soft sigh, brushing against the windows. In the weeks that followed, Maria continued her life with the same simplicity she always had. She baked, she taught, she laughed with the children, and she played whenever her heart told her to. But the world around her kept growing in small, beautiful ways. The children she taught began to perform at school events. A few adults took up music again after years of silence. The man who had once mocked her became one of her biggest supporters, often helping fix the piano whenever it needed care. Even strangers from other towns began visiting, asking to hear the famous piano that used to be broken. Some brought flowers. Others brought instruments of their own to join in. The hall had turned into a small home for everyone who needed to remember what hope sounded like. One sunny afternoon, a young woman arrived from the city. She was a journalist, and she carried a notebook and a small camera. She introduced herself politely and said she was doing a story about people who changed their communities through kindness. "I heard about you and the piano," she said, smiling. "Would you mind if I shared your story?" Maria hesitated at first. She never liked attention, and she didn't think of herself as anyone special. But then she thought of her mother again, and the way her music had reached beyond the small hall, touching so many lives. She nodded gently. "If it helps someone else believe in themselves," she said, "then yes." The journalist spent the day with her, visiting the bakery, talking to the children, and filming bits of Maria playing the piano. The story aired a few weeks later, and once again people from far away wrote letters and messages to her. Some said her story gave them courage to try something new. Others said it reminded them that kindness still existed in the world. Maria read every letter carefully. Some made her laugh, others made her cry, but all of them made her feel deeply thankful. She never wanted fame. She just wanted to keep sharing love the only way she knew how, through music. Years passed, but Maria's story didn't fade. The piano, now well cared for, still stood in the same place. Its wood had darkened slightly with age, and some keys showed signs of wear, but its sound remained as beautiful as ever. One day, as the sun set over the quiet town, Maria sat at the piano again. She was older now, her hands a little slower, her hair streaked with silver, but her spirit was as gentle and steady as ever. She played softly, her touch tender and full of feeling. The melody flowed like a memory, simple, pure, and full of peace. Outside, people passing by stopped to listen through the open door. Some recognized the tune and hummed along quietly. Others just closed their eyes and smiled. When she finished, Maria looked up and saw the faces at the doorway. Children, grown-ups, friends, even a few strangers. She smiled warmly and said, "Would you like to play?" A small boy stepped forward shyly. She moved aside and guided his hands to the keys. "Go on," she said gently. "It's your turn now." The boy pressed the keys slowly, producing uneven notes. But Maria nodded with encouragement. "That's it," she whispered. "Every song begins with one note." The people in the doorway smiled as the little boy continued, his laughter mixing with the sound of the piano. Maria sat beside him, listening. Not to the mistakes, but to the joy. That was what she had always wanted. Not perfection, not applause, just music that came from the heart. As the evening deepened, the golden light filled the hall, wrapping everything in warmth. Maria looked at the piano once more, her heart full. She knew she had done what she was meant to do. She had taken something broken and turned it into hope, for herself and for others. Years later, when people spoke of her, they didn't talk about her as a famous pianist or a performer. They called her something far simpler but far more meaningful. They said, she was the woman who made the broken piano sing, and in that little town the music never stopped. The children she once taught grew up and taught their own. The hall remained filled with laughter, songs, and the spirit of the woman who had reminded everyone that even the simplest acts of love could change the world. Every time someone pressed a key, every time a new song filled the air, it was as if Maria's hands were there, guiding gently, reminding softly, "You don't need a perfect piano, you just need a kind heart." And so the story lived on, not in fame or in books, but in every note that rose from that old piano. The music had started as a joke, but ended as a legacy of love, a melody that would echo for generations. Because sometimes, the most beautiful stories begin when no one expects them to. And sometimes all it takes is one humble heart to remind the world how to listen again.